I'm out here in front of the George Washington Bridge, and you can see behind me, the interesting thing about the data is that some of these numbers get pulled out of whack. There are over 600,000 bridges in America, and over the last decade, the stats on deficient bridges and obsolete bridges, they've actually been getting better. So it's sort of like airplanes. You hear about one thing, and you remember it for a long time, but compared to regular everyday issues, the bridges aren't as bad as we might think in our memory. But there's a lot of problems with the data. If you look behind me, you see the George Washington Bridge. It's massive, but that gets treated as one bridge, which is just the same as any one bridge that you might find in a rural area, in a small part of town that doesn't get a lot of traffic. And in fact, most of the bridges, Kelly, are rural. About 3/4 of the nation's bridges, about 450,000 of them, are in rural areas. And so when you think about urban interstate highway bridges like the ones behind me, that's only 5% of the bridges. 95% of them are not what we see, not what you think about for the most part. And if you think about who owns the bridges, it's not the federal government. It's almost entirely owned by local governments and state governments. The federal government, Kelly, owns less than 2% of the bridges. And if you look at how much it would cost to fix them, it's only about $20 billion. And there are 114 companies in the S&P 500 that have annual sales bigger than that number. $20 billion in sales, that's U.S. Bancorp, which isn't really a tier one name that we talk about every day. So the numbers aren't as bad as you might think, Kelly.
It's somewhat reassuring, Eric, I guess, to your point about how it's a lot of local governments. I mean, is what's happening effectively that people are repairing or fixing up these bridges? Is the number of those in trouble actually coming down?
Yeah, the number is actually going down. So if you look at the data, compared to 10 years ago, the functionally obsolete and structurally deficient bridges, we put that together, there are fewer now as a percentage than 10 years ago. There are also more bridges new that are being built. So there's actually more bridges in total, which make that percentage number go down also.
Yeah. How do decisions get made then with all these various different entities kind of owning? There's not like one group, one federal government that makes a decision. How does that happen? How does that work?
That's where you get into politics. So on the federal level, there was a lot of talk about actually taxing the companies that we talk a lot about who are foreign-based because they're trying to get less taxes. So the U.S. government wanted to tax them specifically to raise money for infrastructure spending. The U.S. Department of Transportation has about $90 billion in their budget, but there's $160 billion in total being spent on highways because a lot of it actually does come from local and state money.